How far would you go for love? Would you leave your family, friends, your country and culture behind and travel halfway across the world during a global pandemic? Would you risk being stuck at an airport in a foreign country for days, alone, frightened, but all so you can marry the love of your life? On this episode of The News and You, we hear from Faith Michelle, who did just that and embarked on an unforgettable journey. But little did she know the devastation that lay ahead. I'm Eleisha Foon, journalist, storyteller, and I've learned everyone you walk past has a story, and that story could change your life. So let's crack it open to discover The News and You.
Gideon was actually born and raised in Uganda, so he's from East Africa. We met actually overseas at a conference. We had just had breakfast together, and then I remember really what caught my attention was when he started to sing. I was like, no, that cannot be the same guy I just had breakfast with. Like, no way. He's taking me to like a whole other world, like with his beautiful voice. I mean, we had already hit it off as friends. And so when I started to hear him sing, I was like, wow, like I could like listen to this 24/7. And then we had some mutual friends around us who, you know, were sort of encouraging us to be together. And I wasn't exactly sure if I wanted that, you know, because we were going to go back to our respective countries. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a long distance relationship because it's a scary thing and I've never done one before, you know. It would be me in Australia, him in Uganda, and the time difference was like 8 hours. So, I mean, it was a daunting thing, but we just had such a deep connection. And I just saw my future with him. We just had kindred hearts. And he just had the most beautiful soul. Okay, mind you, he was really good with his words. He was so good with his words. No, I just said, no, this is the one. Like, I really feel like he's the one. I was 20 when I met him. I know that's young, but I just felt such a deep connection to him. And I said, you know, if this could work out, then I really want to marry him. Like, no matter what it takes, I want to marry this guy. And he felt the same. I said I was too young and I want to finish my studies and do some things in, you know, Melbourne. So we put in a 5-year plan that, okay, in 5 years' time, let's you know, aim for marriage. Because I kind of already knew in my heart that, okay, if I marry this guy, I'm going to have to move to Uganda.
After 6 years of long distance and a lack of support from her parents, Faith was at a crossroads. But soon enough, determination kicked in. So Faith and Gideon set a new wedding date, this time in Uganda.
It was scary to like think that, wow, I'm actually leaving everything I know behind, my family, my home, and move to a developing country. I was like, I loved him so much. And I think it was a little bit more challenging because I didn't have like the full support of my family. So that made me even more emotional. Yeah. And I mean, I packed and then we had to postpone the wedding. For some personal reasons, and then we thought we would postpone it just for a few months, and then COVID hit.
It's a new type of coronavirus.
A mystery virus they'd hoped to contain, but one we now know can jump from human to human.
March 12th, the coronavirus has now entered a devastating new phase.
The U.S. death toll from the virus has surpassed 100 people.
20,000. More than 46,000.
150,000.
200,000.
400,000 people have now died from COVID-19.
She had a choice to make. Stay in Australia and wait out the pandemic in the hope it blows over, or pack up her comfortable life, surrounded by friends and family, and make a risky move halfway across the world for a new life and whatever that may entail.
Nobody wanted to travel, and here I was crazy enough to travel. Saying goodbye to my family, especially I have a twin sister, was really, really, really hard. It took everything within me, I think, not to break down. So I get to the airport and, they need to do all these thorough checks, like the COVID tests and everything. And I actually had to get permission from the Australian government in order to leave. As well as, I needed permission from Uganda to enter the country. So it was a lot of unexpected things. The first leg of the journey was okay. I would say I had butterflies. I just had a lot of mixed emotions. And maybe moments of feeling sick because reality was sinking in wow, I'm actually moving and my family's not coming with me. Everything's fine until I get to my second layover and they tell me that the flight to Uganda is cancelled. And I'm like, what do you mean? I have to get there. My wedding's in 2 weeks. And they said there was no flight out for another month. And because of everything that was going on with COVID, I would have to quarantine for 1 week and take another COVID test and then, stay in the airport hotel for a month. And I was like, no, I can't do that. Literally, I'm getting married in 2 weeks and I didn't plan for this financially or anything, So there were a lot of tears involved, a lot of emotion. And actually at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, is this a sign? Am I not meant to move to Uganda? Is the universe stopping me from moving? I was really scared because I was literally stranded. I wasn't allowed back in Australia because I only had permission to leave. What have I done? Literally, I was blaming myself. I was like, I think I've just made a huge mistake.
Ethiopia's strict policies had her in a chokehold. Fear had gripped Africa's oldest nation, whose Prime Minister was about to declare a 5-month state of emergency. Australia had officially closed its border, so there was no going back. There had to be a way forward. But one thing was certain. There was no way this bride was missing her wedding.
And yeah, I was like, God, I need you to step in now. If there's any time you need to step in, it's right now. Get me out of Ethiopia, please. I was exhausted at this point and I was actually feeling sick to my stomach. I was not even sure if I would make it to Uganda.
After hours of back and forth, battling doubts and uncertainty, finally a breakthrough. Thanks to Faith's network of friends, they managed to pull through just in time.
Oh, they were just a godsend. They were amazing. They really reached out to everyone they knew, and including those in Ethiopia. And thankfully, some of them knew some, respectable men in Ethiopia who called up, the airport officials and were like, no, help this girl out.
Faith was put on the next flight to Tanzania, where her contacts had organised a mutual friend to pick her up on a short layover before getting back on a plane to reach Uganda.
Gideon had arranged for me to take a domestic flight from Dar es Salaam, which is the capital city, to the border of Tanzania and Uganda.
The plane lands, and Faith is exhausted by the ordeal, but still needing to collect her 2 suitcases, which carried the contents of her life and her wedding dress. She arrives at an empty carousel and waits, and waits, and waits. Her bags are nowhere to be found.
They lost it. The airline lost it. And I was like, this is why I thought that everything was going wrong and I was making a mistake, because nothing was going right. And I was like, what do you mean it's lost? I have my wedding dress in there. My life is in there. You have to find it, and they give you the tag numbers, the bag tags. And I said, please just look for it. It has to be somewhere. And they said, okay, it's probably here somewhere in the airport. We just can't find it. But I had to go, I literally had to go everywhere. I had to go downstairs to arrival, past the immigration, just to go check the lost and found. And I didn't find it. So I was stressing so much. I went to the baggage service and I said, look, the airline lost my bag. I just want to know, can you track it for me? These are the only bag tags I have. And the lady was so kind. She was like, your bags are in Uganda. And I was like, what? And she's like, it's in Uganda, in Entebbe airport. And I thought that was so wild. I was like, how did they get there? Funny enough, my bags arrived before I did.
Faith still had a long way to go. Although she couldn't speak Swahili, the national language of Tanzania and Uganda, she managed to track down a taxi, which would take her almost 2 hours to reach the border.
I'm alone in this taxi with this guy, and we're like rounding the mountains and everything, and I'm like, God, just get me there safely. Like, I hope nothing happens to me.
The taxi eventually arrived at the border, which stretched 260 miles. Faith would soon step foot on the dusty red soil of Uganda. This was her new home in East Africa.
So I get to the border and I cross over by foot. And so when they saw my letter, they said, no, you're meant to enter by an aircraft, by this flight number. And I said, yes, but that was cancelled, so we had to make alternative arrangements. And they're like, no, you can't enter. They literally thought, what is this Asian girl like doing? Like, she probably was like, you know, I'm Chinese. So they're probably like, is she carrying COVID? I'm like, look, I have negative. But to get, you know, access, they want a bribe, you know. I mean, I only had Australian dollars on me. And honestly, I was not like, but I was just not in an emotional state to really like fight anymore. And I had finished. Like, I was drained of all my battery, and I was like, I cannot do this.
It was the last straw. Faith had been travelling for over 4 days now, navigating language barriers, border crossings, baggage mishandlings, strict COVID policies, alongside racial discrimination. She called Gideon, breaking down over the phone, unable to pay the bribe. So he negotiated a deal with the Uganda government officials.
It took several hours, but the authorities managed to get through to the security at the border, and they eventually let me through.
Gideon's friend was on the other side. They drove for several hours to a halfway point along the journey to his hometown, where he was there, ready and waiting for her. This was it. She was almost there, minutes away from his sweet embrace.
As soon as I saw Gideon, like as soon as I saw his face from the car, I was like, everything just disappeared. All my stress, all my worries, all my fears, like everything just disappeared. And I ran and hugged him, and I just melted in his arms. I was like, I'm finally home, like I made it. It's a moment I'll just treasure forever. It was really probably the best moment, one of the best moments I've had with him, because I just didn't know, with the world shutting down, I didn't know when I was going to see him and how long it would take to see him, especially with all the, you know, the counter flights and the ordeal of everything I'd been through. Just seeing him made me feel so happy. And, you know, when I just saw him, I was like, no, this is my home. He is my home.
But it was only a short moment together before she was whisked away to a hotel for a mandatory 2-week quarantine.
I was not allowed to see him, but he was so sweet. He would come and he would visit me, like, and I would stand on the balcony and like wave to him, and then he would give security like snacks, you know, whatever I wanted. The 2 weeks in quarantine actually really helped me. Yeah, you feel lonely, but it just really helped me to just settle in, to process everything that had happened. Okay, I left Australia for good. I'm now in Uganda. This is going to be my home. 2 days after, I literally had 1 day to go and find a hairstylist and a makeup artist.
And then, finally, the day they had all been waiting for, their wedding day.
Reality.
To my king, to know that today you become my husband, phase always and forever, makes my heart beat at a new record. We have been through so much, and finally our day is here. I cannot wait to see you standing and waiting for me at the end of the aisle. Words cannot express how excited I am to say I do.
I love you, my cookie, to the stars and back. See you soon, hubby. Don't be late.
It was really beautiful. You know, I didn't really care if nobody was there. All I wanted was just to say yes, like I do, to Gideon. Here and now, I pledge my life to yours, that your dreams become my dreams. No matter where life leads me, I know that as long as you are there, that is where I'm meant to be.
This is more than This is etched into eternity.
Every waking thought, God has never allowed for me to forget you since that time. Today I stand before all these people. All that is dear to me, I surrender through God.
The only thing that was, that made me feel really sad was that my family couldn't be there.
A bittersweet moment was transformed when Gideon stepped out during the reception with a song he wrote for her.
I know the time is fast spent, so I'm going to make it as short as possible. But I feel Faith in the morning did something amazing. She sent me a card with beautiful words. This is what I can give you. I set out on an road many years ago, hoping I would find true love.
It felt like the whole world just disappeared and it was just him and me.
But I got lost a time or two, wiped my brow and kept pushing through. Couldn't see how
it actually brought me back to the first time I fell in love with him, because that is how I fell in love with him when I heard his voice. That was like my favorite part of the wedding.
This much I know is true.
I just felt we were so strong as a couple. At that point, I was like, you know what? I don't care if I have to go through this journey again. I don't care what life throws at me. As long as it's him and I together, we can face the world. We can face anything. He really loved me so well. He protected me so fiercely that I just felt so safe with him.
But navigating life in Uganda came with its own set of challenges.
And Uganda is a very male-dominated society. So especially with the older generation, your voice is not so much heard. But Gideon, everyone saw how much Gideon loved and respected me, that because he was there and they saw how he treated me, I actually felt respected and heard. It's a developing country and they speak English, but it's different sort of English, They call a white person or just anyone with fair tone a Mzungu. So anywhere I would go, they're like, oh, it's Mzungu, and so you get a lot of attention, because you stand out, you're amongst Africans. Honestly, I think I definitely had moments where I felt homesick. And I also, doubted, if I wanted to raise children in Uganda, because the lifestyle is so different. And there is a lot of open corruption in Uganda, which is something I'm not used to, because in Australia we don't really see this. So I was actually scared, to raise a family there. So, we had many conversations of, okay, when we have children, I want us to move back to Australia. Of course, we'll be we'll have two homes. We'll be going back and forth, because Gideon had a lot going, on in Uganda too. But, he was so open to, also having a home in Australia and our kids being raised there and everything. And we just went through so much. We were trying to, do a business, and our business partners stole from us and, left us with a loan and in debt. But, everything we went through, no matter who cheated us, who stole from us, how much we lost, how many people we lost trust in, we always looked at each other and we always said, this only makes us stronger and more in love. And really it did.
1 year and 11 days later, Faith and Gideon were brimming with hope for the future. Their life as newlyweds was just beginning, or so they thought.
We had just celebrated our anniversary at my father-in-law's country house. The family was together and everything. Everything was going well. We had even discussed having children. I was so ready, to bear his babies. He said to me that morning, as soon as he woke up, he said, take me to the hospital. And I thought, okay, this must be really serious, because he was holding his abdomen and he was moaning, and I had given him Panadol, but it wasn't working. And of course, I'm really stressed because, you know, I don't know what's wrong with him, and all I want to do is comfort him and make sure like the pain just goes away. So we arrive at the hospital and the doctor was like, no, it's fine. He's fine. Everything's going to be fine. Because initially they thought it was ulcers, you know, so they were just giving him ulcer medication. But I was like, it can't be ulcers, because if you've given him so much ulcer medication, the pain should have subsided by now, but nothing is working. The pain is only intensifying. But they're like, no, he's fine. It's just acid reflux. He'll be good to go. We're going to release him tonight. And I was like, what? So, you know, I'm with him in the hospital, and nothing is working. And then I remember Gideon asked me to put a mattress on the floor because he wasn't comfortable on the bed. We put the mattress on the floor and I brought him down, and, you know, he lay against me, against my chest, and I was, you know, massaging his stomach. He drank some water. He said, it's so painful. He came back into my arms. He looked me right in the eye. And he just went. And those were his last words. And there was a really, really strange noise coming out of him. What they call the chain of death. And it was like a rattling, like chain noise. I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like a noise I can never forget. I thought he had just fainted from the intense pain, you know, because his eyes were still open, but they were glazed over. So I'm like hitting him on his face. I'm trying to get him to wake up. I'm literally shouting for the doctor to come. They immediately rush in. They take him out of my arms and they start performing CPR. And I'm like, what? Like, why are they doing that? I'm saying, okay, where are your defibrillators? Like, you know, the electric pads. I'm like, where are they? If CPR is not working, use the defibrillators. And they just looked at me. They're like, it's too late. He's gone. He's brain dead. The first thought in my head was, no, you cannot leave me here amongst your people alone. I cannot do this. I remember thinking, like, I left everything behind. I literally sacrificed everything, gave up my family, my home, everything to be here with you. And you want to leave me here with your people alone? It was really horrific and really traumatizing, especially seeing your husband die, like witnessing the whole thing. And I felt so guilty because I thought maybe there was something I could have done to prevent his death. You know, I felt like as a wife, I neglected him. And then when they wanted to take his body away, they literally had to carry me away. And I was just so angry at them. They wrapped his body in a body bag. And I just felt like that was so horrific. Why would you do that in front of me? Like, dispose of him like some garbage.
Gideon was buried in his hometown 4 days later.
I remember breaking down over his coffin just before we buried him, and I just was sobbing, and I was like I was just whispering to him, you know, like, just please don't leave me here, like, please, I cannot go through life without you. I cannot bear this grief and this loss. Like we've literally like dealt with everything together. We've gone through so much together. And now you want to leave me? Now you want to like just suddenly die with no goodbye, with no last words, with no like one more I love you, no more like cuddle, like you just want to leave me with nothing, you know? And I said, please, like I was literally like whispering, like so desperate, saying, I can bear anything else, but don't leave me. You know what's really traumatizing, what's really, really hard to accept. My husband, the man I slept next to, the man I loved, the man I was planning to have a future with, you know, them making his bed in a wooden box, in a coffin, and then you lowering that coffin down, you know, 6 feet under. The love of my life, my everything, my world was gone. You know, I didn't want to believe that my world overnight was shattered.
Grief engulfed Faith in the weeks that followed, an all-consuming force that left her paralysed, unable to sleep or eat. She barely left her room, abandoned in the place she and Gideon planned to raise a family. At one point, she lost the ability to speak.
And I felt so naked and exposed. Like I lost all sense of confidence in my identity. I literally lost my voice for the first several months. Because now I was alone in Uganda. I didn't have my family. I didn't have anything familiar around me. It was just a country I no longer knew. It was almost a country I hated because it brought so much grief in my life.
Eventually, she decided to leave Uganda behind in order to heal, seek therapy, and get support.
Grief becomes your companion, and that's okay. The grief will stick with you for life. It's not going to be like the same as it was before because there's so many layers to grief. You know, the grief will change. I refused to allow anyone to call me a widow for the longest time because it just doesn't sit right, you know, especially with a young person. I became a widow at 27 years old.
In the months that followed, Faith found solace in writing, spilling sorrow and pouring grief onto pages. The written word became her comfort. She then turned those pages into a book.
My book, which is titled Breaking Barriers, I think it was probably just after a year of his passing. What drove me to really write the book was Gideon. You know, he was behind it all because he always said to me, he goes, why don't you write a book, you know? But he wanted me to write a book about our love story. And I always said, you know, I never wanted to write a book. So I always said to him, like, no, yeah, okay, maybe for a 10-year anniversary, you know, kind of just to shut him up, you know, not knowing that, you know, we wouldn't have a 10-year anniversary. He was the one who motivated me to write, to turn my journal into a book, basically. And so I did it in honor of him. It's not exactly what he wanted, but it's in honor of him and his memory and, you know, also of our love story, because honestly, we really had a beautiful love story. I just want people to know that, you know, long distance first of all does work. It's not for everyone, but it does work. But also, interracial marriage, it is hard. There is cultural differences, but, you know, we managed to work it. We worked at it and we created something so beautiful. Every love story is different, you know, but if you really love that person, you will do anything to make it work. Even if your family is completely against it, it can still work. So I don't want people to look at my relationship and say, you should have, you know, just listened to your family and stayed in Australia.
Faith still believes it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all.
To me, it was the best decision of my life. I would do it all over again 1,000 times, just for those few moments of Gideon. I know he would want me just to keep on going. I have to learn to live again, because that's what Gideon would want of me.
This is Gideon's original song, which hasn't been released until now.
to anyone out there who's going through Google Ads, going through grief, you guys, you're just so brave and you're so brilliant and you're just so resilient, and you're going to get through this. We're not alone. Don't lose sight of hope, because as soon as you lose sight of hope, you literally, you don't want to live.
Thank you for listening to the very first episode of The News and You. Your support truly means the world, so please sign up to the Patreon for exclusive access. If this story impacted you in any way, would you consider sharing the love by giving The News and You a rating and review? I'd love to know, what are your key takeaways? I encourage you to share this with someone, because there's power in our stories, so why not send it to them right now? Until next time, remember, your story matters, and there's a shared truth behind everything.